Folks, Brian Bledsoe with you here once again for your November edition of the Ranch Weather Radar, brought to you exclusively by Silveus Insurance. Very important time of year, as it always is, as we get into November, because we're dealing with the seasonal change ahead of the winter, lots of planning that's taking place. So we go through a lot of information in these videos, and I'm going to do exactly just that for you today. Hope you're doing just fine. Before we go ahead and get going with forecast, let's see where we've been for the past 6 months in terms of moisture. And if you take it for just that 6 month period, you could see that we've been very fortunate across basically the eastern half of Montana. And nobody has really struggled with dryness, at least in that 6 month period, with what this metric is. The reason why I like to break it down, though, is because as we shorten that window from, say, 6 months to, say, 3 months, well, things change quite a bit. And you can see the dryness that's been poking its way up here across north central portions of Montana, where some areas have been quite dry. You don't have to go too far to the south to get back in the good moisture, though. You can see that. But this area, all the way through the north central, has been struggling during that 3 month period. We can take it down even more. The past 2 months, that dryness magnifies itself even more. Okay, right there, right in the north central portion of the state. The south central and southeast part have been doing just fine, been wet, no problems there at all. And then during the past month, let's look at that. It's pretty much anchored in the same spot. All right. So there's certainly haves and have nots here. And the good news is, at least about the past 30 days, is we've been getting some better moisture here across the northwest corner of Montana. We've also had great fall moisture here across eastern Montana down into northeast portions of Wyoming. So if we could just get it spread out in those areas that actually need it, we would be in pretty good shape. In fact, the current drought monitor looks like this. Plenty of dryness going on across the state, really anywhere north and west of that line, with areas out here in the north central and northwest part of the state actually having the worst problems with dryness right now. South is south central and southeast, obviously no problems. All of the drought bias is farther to the north and northwest. They need me to tell you that. So let's look and see what's going to happen in the future here. The current state of the oceans across the globe look like this. All right. We've got our La Nina episode that's going on right there that's been intensifying. We have some cooler water up here in the North Atlantic. This is called the AQM, which I'll elaborate more on just a moment. We've got some cooling that's taking place here in the Gulf of Alaska. We've got some warmth here. And our Indian Ocean has been in a cool spot here as well. So this is the table setter as far as what's going to happen as we head through the course of the winter. And with the La Nina episode, okay, this is important because all of this green and blue are easterly trade winds down here along the equator. These are westerly wind bursts here. But because of those easterly trade winds, that nice westerly wind burst here, which a lot of times will make the weather pattern across the western United States especially more active, is really stuck. What we need is all these easterly trade winds, this blue and green, to break down. And then that would allow these westerly wind bursts to go all the way across the Pacific and make things more active on a broader scale. I don't think that's going to happen, at least for a little while. We are in that La Nina right now, and we're likely going to stay that way at least a little while longer. This is an interesting map. Okay. Over here on the left side, just say that's Australia, Indonesia. Over here on the right side is the west coast of South America. And then we've got a top down from right at the surface all the way down to 450 meters. And in this sector right here, you can see that's where all the cool water is. Some of those cool anomalies are down to about 150 meters. So the La Nina is alive and well and kicking. Okay. The thing I am watching is all of this warmer than average water that is pooling out here, especially in this sector. And when those easterly trade winds collapse, what's going to happen is this warm water is going to slosh its way all the way back across the equator towards South America. And that, my friends, is what is called the transition from La Nina to neutral to potentially an El Nino episode. All right. Not right now, though. We are still in La Nina. Our latest value down there to around negative 1.1. That is firmly in weak La Nina territory. Okay. On the higher echelon of weak La Nina territory, a little bit more strengthening, we'd be in moderate, but right now we're still in weak. And the overall forecast trend, all right, looking at that, keeps us in that La Nina until about right there, and then we start to come out of it. All right. I kind of took that black line and drew it as the mean of all of these red lines. All of these red lines are different members of the model. All right. So we max out this La Nina pretty much in December. And then in January and February, we weaken it. We're right up there, pretty close to neutral by February. And then we make a run up here toward weak El Nino territory by the time we head toward May. All right. That is a very quick transition from where we are right now. And it is a very important transition because when the oceans change like that, it has some pretty significant implications for the overall forecast. But this is the trend, folks. La Nina right now, briefly neutral, trending toward El Nino by the time next spring and certainly next summer roll around. Some key ENSO points here. Whenever you see ENSO, that just simply means El Nino, Southern Oscillation, meaning are we in El Nino, La Nina, or right in the middle, La Nada? These are the points that I want to make. La Nina is present now, but will max out in December before exiting quickly. ENSO neutral, okay, will likely occur late winter, early spring. It also appears likely that El Nino will develop late spring into summer. While both La Nina and El Nino get too much credit and blame, they are important factors in the seasonal forecast. They are table setters, if you will, for certain weather regimes and patterns to actually set up. So I really think this is going to be the trend going forward. And I watch this stuff all the time. So if I see any changes that I need to tweak, I will definitely be doing that. But for right now, that's what I'm going with. All right. I mentioned that little bit of cooling in the North Atlantic. All right. So that little area is called the Atlantic quad pole mode. It's an important factor in the forecast from now through February. It is every year. It really heads up late fall and the traditional winter season of this December, January, and February. So right now, these are the sea surface temperature anomalies. Okay, I showed that to you a little bit ago. This is your focus up here, right there where you're seeing the blues and the greens. Okay, La Nina going on, whatnot. What did we look like last year at this time? Well, we were much warmer up here in the North Atlantic. Okay. We were weaker with the La Nina, and the North Pacific was generally the same. So going back, that's where we are right now. Okay. Stronger La Nina right there. North Pacific, kind of the same. Cooler, much cooler AQM. See, that's where we were last year. So we have a La Nina in progress, and currently we have a cool AQM. So what does that mean for us? Well, that puts us down here in the lower left-hand portion of this graphic. La Nina going on, cold AQM right there is G, neutral AQM, or maybe even slightly cool AQM is right there in H. And what that means for us in terms of the pattern this winter, you can see all of this green up here across Montana, southern Canada, up here across parts of the Dakotas, Minnesota, and also right in this sector here. All right. That's with a cold AQM. So that means very active wintry weather up here across the northern Rockies and northern plains, and then eventually into parts of the Mississippi Valley in the Mid South. If that cool AQM warms up even just a little bit to neutral, you still get essentially the same. Okay. But that wetness becomes broader into the Pacific Northwest, Idaho, Montana, northern Wyoming still doing okay. The northern plains still mostly okay. The Midwest still okay. But you can see where these areas are favoring dryness out here across parts of the Oregon, California, into the Great Basin, and down here across the southern tier. All right. Not up here in Montana, not up here in the northern Rockies and northern plains. So, regardless if we stay in La Nina or regardless if we have La Nina and a cold AQM or a neutral AQM, I still feel pretty good about our winter being a pretty good winter. And by pretty good, I mean we could have some harsh times this winter by way of cold and by way of snow. The overall weather pattern is favoring that. History is favoring that as well. So I think that this is definitely something that we kind of have to buy into at this point, which would be good because we've got some drought that we need to erase across the majority of the state, minus the south and the southeast corner. Okay. That metric was just with the AQM. So let's look and see what some of these seasonal models have for us. Let's look at the temperature anomaly from November to May from the Euro seasonal model. This is what we get. Most of November was going to be warm anyway. The November run of the Euro seasonal model has us quite warm. All right. But the key here is the change that takes place into December. Here's December's temperature forecast. And these models are terrible at seeing real cold air. So anytime you see a signal where it's just kind of average in that white, and you've even got some blue up here knifing its way into Montana, that's a signal that could be pretty cold for December and also active in terms of snowfall, too. The farther south you go, I still think that it's warmer than average. But for Montana, I think December is going to be quite a bit different than what we had for November. What about January? It's the same thing. I think maybe the farther west you go, western Montana might be a little bit warmer, obviously, than the east, but we'll have to wait and see. Still, the main corridor of cool does something like this. Okay. Punching into the eastern two-thirds of Montana, northern plains, into the upper Midwest. February, we still have that cool signal up here across Montana for the most part. All right. Because we still have cool air coming in like this. March, still there, just a little bit more neutral. April, we start to warm back up a little bit. And by April, notice where the core of the warmth is down here. Watch what it does as we head toward May. You see it move to the north and west. All right. That I think is that El Nino influence because during an El Nino, when we make that transition, that warmth and that drier pattern move farther to the north and to the northwest. So with that in mind, let's see what the forecast precipitation anomalies look like here for November to May. November, largely dry across most of Montana here, across north central and the east. We are wetter here. All right. So for the most part, we've seen that kind of unfold a little bit. The main core of dryness has been really removed farther to the east and to the southeast here. Okay. December, look at the wetness show up here from the Pacific Northwest, all across Montana, Wyoming, parts of the northern plains, and right here into the Mississippi and the Ohio Valley. But Montana, southern Canada, looks to be snowier than average for December, along with colder than average. January, snowier than average again across Montana. February, pretty much the same story. So that's what I was saying. I think this winter has potential to be fairly harsh across Montana. All right. Especially during the heart of the cold season. By March, we are still active across the northern tier of the country, including Montana. April, we start to see things dry out. Like I said, that's that pivot from neutral to upcoming El Nino type stuff. So we start to see a little bit of dryness favor areas up here across Montana. Maybe not necessarily for everybody, or it's not all that high end, but the better moisture is right up the zipper instead of farther to the north and northwest. And by May, you see the dryness setting up here. Okay. The farther northwest you go, reflecting that El Nino influence. So here in the midsection, we are still wetter than average. Probably eastern Montana is still wetter than average, but I am worried about the summer, kind of doubling down on this expanding dryness up here in the northwest. I don't think we'll have anything terribly to worry about in terms of dryness through May. In fact, for a lot of those months, it's probably going to be the exact opposite. But by the time we head into the heart of summer, this is definitely something that I'm watching that we could dry out that pattern by quite a bit. All right. So 2023 was the last time we transitioned from La Nina to El Nino. It was actually late 22 and into early 23 when we made that transition. So I thought it would behoove us to see what happened with that. So let's see what happened in 2023, January, February temperature and precipitation anomalies. This is the temperature anomalies for January and February of 23. We were warmer than average across a good part of the state, and we were cold here and snowy farther south. I don't think this is going to be the outcome here. I think, I always tell you, every La Nina is different, every El Nino is different, and I don't think this is going to be the case here with this. In fact, I think it will be, as I showed you, warmer and drier back here to the west across California and parts of the Great Basin. I think this will be the opposite too. I think we will be colder in this sector for the reasons that I just mentioned. Precipitation wise, we were drier here and wetter here. I think we flip-flop that. Okay. That's what I think happens. And I think that wetness continues this way. What about March and April? Temperature anomalies and precipitation anomalies from 23. It was cold. March and April of 23, it was cold. All across Montana, and most of the west, and the north cold across the Dakotas. Precipitation wise, it wasn't that wet. Okay. There was some snow here and there, but there were chunks of the state that were still drier than average. California was wetter. We were dry up the middle, which is interesting. Okay. I still think that we're going to be active over the top versus what happened in 23. May to June temperature and precipitation anomalies. This is what I was talking about when we transitioned to the El Nino. We are cooler south like that initially. We are warmer farther north. And you can see that warmth that really flexed itself here from the Pacific Northwest, Northern Rockies, and Northern Plains. Precipitation wise, we didn't do too bad. Okay. We were a lot wetter than average in this sector here. East and Southeast Montana, we were dry up here, though, in the Pacific Northwest. We were dry through the Corn Belt in May and June. Certainly, this corridor had the best opportunity for a lot of rain. What about July to August, temperature and precipitation anomalies? July, we turned up the heat. Really in all of these areas here, but certainly up across California, the Pacific Northwest, most of Montana. The hottest part of this regime was down here from Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and along the coast of the Gulf of America. And precipitation wise, we started to dry things out. North central and northeast Montana, we were still doing okay here. But what happened here in July and August, we had the remnants of what was Hurricane Hilary moved up through Southern California, Nevada, Western Utah, and some of that moisture made its way into southwest portions of Montana. So if you take that out of the equation, I think Montana ends up being a lot drier for that July, August period of 23. Okay. What about September, October? Because if this El Nino materializes in the summer, it's going to be existing in the fall and winter season too. Okay. So September and October temperature anomalies in 23, it was warm for a lot of places, warmer than average. Classic El Nino type stuff here. Precipitation wise, it was dry in the Northwest, and we were still pretty wet across the South Central, and Southeast. What about November, December in 23? It was a blowtorch across the majority of the country. All of Montana was warmer than average here. Okay. All of it. And for precipitation, we didn't see much snow. It dried things out across the majority of the state. And we made things wetter here, coming up from the south and southwest. So my point is not every La Nina and El Nino are the same, but there are things to glean from past years that we can kind of paint a picture with here. All right. So my main message is the way 2026 starts in Montana likely isn't going to be how it finishes. Okay. And I really want to focus on all summer El Nino analogs since 2000. So it gives us 25 years to look at. And these are the years, May to August, when El Nino was existing. 02, 04, 06, 09, 18, and 23. And when you average all that out, your main dry signal, at least during the summertime, favors that area there, parts of the Southwest, and the Pacific Northwest. All right. So the eastern third of Montana historically ends up being drier when we have a May to August El Nino in progress. At least that's the average of those 6 years right there. All right. And it was a little wetter than average here in the Southwest. But like I said, I think that may be some of the reason as that tropical moisture came up here in 23 and there was better rain across Idaho and Southwest Montana. All right. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't concerned about after we get past maybe May and into June, that I'd be lying if I said I wasn't concerned about things drying out and heating up during that time, just simply based on history. We'll have to wait and see how things go forward, but that's what I'm looking at least right now. And temperature wise, when you average out all those years, May to August, this is your warm area here. Okay. Pacific Northwest, the West Coast, the South, Southwest. All right. All right, folks. That's all I have for you this month on the Ranch Weather Roundup. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, I always welcome that. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me on my cell phone or always email me, brian@brianbledsoeweather.com. If I don't hear from you in the interim, I'm going to be catching you all in Billings for the end of the year meeting for the Montana stock growers. It's always a favorite event of mine. I'm really happy to get in touch with a lot of you, share a meal, share a drink, or just simply share a conversation. But I'm looking forward to getting to Billings in December. And it doesn't look like it's going to be as warm when I'm up there this year versus what we've had in years the past. We'll have to see how that plays out. But in the meantime, I hope you are well, and we'll be chatting again soon.